Hello, and welcome to the Scratch Made Life Kitchen. My name is Kim, and today we are going to make a Swiss style cheese. Hey Kim, why did you say Swiss style, not just Swiss? Well, you know, here in America, we go to the store and we find something called Swiss cheese. You're not going to find that very many other places because Swiss is more of a type of cheese. Kind of like cab is a varietal, but you're going to find a bunch of different ones. So you got Jarlsberg, and today we're going to do what we call a baby Swiss. Now, Swiss style cheeses are characteristic. We know them for the holes, or what we call the eyes in the cheeses. Different styles of the Swiss cheese have different size eyes. The baby Swiss we're going to make today is going to be a smaller eye. It's going to be a butterier cheese with a tiny bit of nuttiness to it. So let's get started. Now with Swiss cheeses, due to the eye development that we want to have happen, we want to make bigger batches. So I tend to make a 2-gallon batch. So we're going to start with 2 gallons of milk, which we have in our stainless steel pot here. Now our milk is raw milk that we get from Valley Milk, simply bottled out of Modesto, California. It's wonderful milk. If you have access to raw milk, it's the best to use. You're never going to use ultra pasteurized milk. For more information on the milk to use in cheese making, I do have a video on my YouTube channel that goes into great detail on that. Okay, so the first thing we do when we make any cheese is we heat the milk. For this cheese, we're going to heat it to 84 degrees. Once it hits 84 degrees, and that should take about 15 minutes or so on medium heat, we're going to add our mesophilic culture and our pea Shermani. What are those? Well, your mesophilic culture is what is going to create the good bacteria that creates the good flavor in your cheese. The pea Shermani is what we add to make those holes in our Swiss style cheese, and we'll talk a little bit more how that works at a later step. So you're going to start by adding 1/4 teaspoon of the mesophilic culture. Now, if you're using raw milk, you're going to use half that amount. So we're going to use 1/8. Now, if you don't have these itty bitty spoons and you're going to get into cheese making, get into them. It's really important that you use the remite. And we just do this, just sprinkle it across the top here until it's because we want it to be thoroughly dispersed through the milk. So that's how you add your mesophilic culture. Your pea Shermani, you add the same way. For 2 gallons, we're going to add 1/16 teaspoon, which is a pinch. And we're going to do it the same way. We're just going to get our powder, we're going to level it off, and we're going to sprinkle it across the top here, okay? And put that off to the side. After you do that, you're going to put your lid on the top. You're going to let it sit for 5 minutes to rehydrate. And you want to do that because it's a powder. And if it's rehydrated, it's going to get in throughout the milk better than if it just stays a powder. If it just stays a powder, it's not going to do a whole lot for you. So after the 5 minutes is up, you're going to take your lid off and you're going to take a spoon. Now these kind of spoons are great for cheese making because in cheese making we stir up and down. And you're going to stir up and down and round around the pot so you can get those things, the mesoculture and the pea Shermani, mixed in there really, 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 really well. There we go. 15 to 20 times should do it for you. Take it out. Put the lid back on. And then you're going to let it sit and ripen for 45 minutes. Now, the ripening is the stage at which the mesophilic culture starts to work its magic and starts the development of the good bacteria that's going to create a wonderful flavor in our cheese. All right, let's set this aside for 45 minutes. Okay. 45 minutes is over. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add our rennet and our calcium chloride to our milk. Calcium chloride is used when you're using pasteurized milk because it repairs some of the damage done by the pasteurization process. If you're using a recipe that doesn't call for it and you are using pasteurized milk, use the same amount of calcium chloride as the recipe calls for rennet. And what's rennet? Rennet is what starts the magic of the curds and the whey separating. And it makes it kind of look like a big ball of tofu, all right? So what we do is we take some water that is unchlorinated because chlorine will kill the wonderful stuff you're trying to do with your mesoculture. And just put a little bit of it in a small ramekin like this. And for this recipe, we're going to use 1/2 teaspoon of rennet. Now you can use either liquid or vegetable. I prefer vegetable rennet because I have vegetarian friends. And then you're just going to pour it into your spoon and get a beaded, so this is a quarter, so I gotta do it twice. Get a beaded measurement. And you're gonna put that in there with your water and then just stir it up. Now you're always gonna add your calcium chloride first. The reason being is the second you add your rennet and it hits the milk, it starts to set up. So if I add the calcium chloride after that, the rennet's already starting to work a little bit, so the calcium chloride will not get completely mixed in with all of the milk. Now, if you forgot, do it, because it's better to do it afterwards than not at all, but add the calcium chloride first. Now we're just gonna do the rennet because we're using raw milk. Take your spoon and pour the liquid in while you're moving your spoon around. And the reason we add the water to it is it just helps it get more equally dispersed through our milk and gives us better odds of success. So we're gonna again mix it in the same way, up and down, round and round, 10 to 15, 20 times. Then you're going to put your lid on it because you always want to maintain your temperature at the original heating temperature unless your recipe asks you to do something else. And the best way to do that is leave your lid on the pot and use a stainless steel pot. And stainless steel is always preferable because it's not porous, so it can't hide nasty bacteria. So let's put this out of our way. Through the magic of video production, it's been 45 minutes or half an hour, half an hour. For the rennet to set up, I'm sorry. And we're gonna check for a clean break. And a clean break is simply where the curds and the whey start to cleanly break away from each other. What I like to do is just take my curd cutter or an icing knife and push it down in the middle and look to see if there's separation of the curd and the whey. When I press down, I should see some liquid filling up in the middle, and I do. I'm not sure if you can see that, but there you go. You can also pull your curds away from the side and see if liquid starts to fill up in the side. Now, if your liquid is cloudy, let it sit for another 5 or 10 minutes. It means it's not quite ready. So for this recipe, we're gonna cut it to 3/8 of an inch. It doesn't have to be with surgical precision, but get as close as you can. And you're gonna make a checkerboard and you're gonna do horizontal and vertical cuts. So I'm gonna go across this way. And there we go. This is important. This starts the process of the curds and whey, the whey being released from the curds, I should say. That's a better way to put it. And now we're gonna go like this. So start at the top and cut. Come down a little lower and cut all the way down and down. And this is how we get both our horizontal and vertical cuts done. Now the next step is we're going to stir these curds for about 5 minutes. And the reason for this stir is that if we find any really big curds, we can cut them up. Well, let's see, I want you to see how beautiful these curds are. Look at that. And you can see there are a lot of big curds. So just take the end of your spoon and gently cut them down to size. And then make sure you go all the way down to the bottom and lift them up, and then you're gonna cut. And this 5 minutes right here is solely for the purpose to make sure that your curds are all cut to size. The smaller the curd cut, the more whey is going to be released. So in some of your drier cheeses, you'll find as small as 1/4 of an inch cut because they want a lot of whey to come out of those cheeses. Our Swiss is medium moisture. We like that buttery flavor. We like that Swiss style texture. And that is obtained partially by not getting quite as much whey out as you do with some of the other cheeses. And just gently stir these curds. Go from the bottom up. And when you see the really big ones, cut them down to size gently with the end of your spoon. So after that 5 minutes is up, you're going to put your lid on it and you're going to let it sit for another 5 minutes. The purpose of this is so that the curds can start to firm up a little bit, kind of rest. You just chop them all up and stir them up and everything. They're going, okay, give me a break for 5 minutes here. And after that 5 minutes is up, you'll notice the curds start to settle down a little bit. The curds are heavier than the whey. So the next 5 minutes, you're going to stir them very gently, very slowly to try to start getting some of the whey out of the curds. Then you're going to let them sit for another 5 minutes. So cut, stir gently for 5 minutes and cut up the big ones. Let's sit for 5 minutes, stir again, and let's sit. Now, prior to all this, you will have got a big pot, about a 2-gallon pot of water on the stove and heated it to 130 degrees. So we're going to set this aside because for the next step, you're going to need this hot water. And what you're going to do is you're going to empty about 1/3 of the whey out of the curds that you just cut after they sit for that last 5 minutes. And then you're going to add back the same amount of this hot water. And you're going to stir the curds until it gets up to about 95 degrees. And once it gets to 95 degrees, about there, 94, 96, not 100, not 90, but somewhere right there in the middle, you're going to stir it for 5 minutes. And then you're going to add more of this hot water to it until it reaches 102 degrees. And then you're going to stir it for about 20 minutes. Now here I have a pot that I stirred for the 20 minutes. And what this is called is washing your curds. And it's another way of getting the whey to come out of the curd. Now with some cheeses, you won't take the whey out and put hot water in, and those will be cheeses that are a little sharper. What the hot water does is it gives you a more buttery flavor. So you're going to use this in Gouda, you're going to use this in Havarti, and we use this in almost all of the Swiss recipes. And you're just going to stir these curds at the 102 degree temperature. Now, if your trusty thermometer tells you it's below 102, just take a couple scoops of the hot water, put it in your pot, and keep stirring. Now what we're going for is a curd that kind of looks like big grains of rice. You see that? And when I mush them together, they're going to stay together. And that means we're ready to go on to our next step. You're going to pour out as much of this whey as you possibly can. And the way that you can do that without losing curds is just pour it through a strainer like that. Okay. So the next step is going to be to fill our mold with curds. Now I've taken a piece of cheesecloth that I sterilized by boiling it. And I'm going to put it in the mold like that. And you know what? I'm just going to use my hands. I'm just going to get in here and put my curds in here and fill it up. And you want to have something at the ready that will allow your whey to drain. So here I have a nice little cooling rack with a baking rack on the bottom of it. So the whey will get caught in this tray. And I'm going to get these curds in here. I'm going to use the back of my hand to push them down. And I'm going to keep filling it up until I've used all my curds. Now, if it bubbles over on the top just a little bit, it's okay, because know that as you're pressing it, it's going to get a little smaller because there's still whey in these curds, regardless of all the different processes that you used to get the whey out, there's still whey in the curds. So just use the back of your hand to help push it down some. And when you've used all your curds in here, see, now this is a 2-gallon mold. And we use 2 gallons of milk. And I've only got a couple curds left in there. So we're gonna get them all in there. Now take your cheesecloth and dress your curds, which means you're just going to cover your curds with the cheesecloth. And then you're gonna take your follower that came with your cheese mold and you're gonna put it on the top. I like to press it down just a little bit before I put the weight on it. And you're gonna press this for an hour at about 8 pounds. And you can use a lot of different things to press it. You don't have to buy special stuff. I just have these flat weights right here and I'll set them on the top and let them sit. So we're gonna let that press for about an hour at 8 pounds. And then we're going to flip it and then we're going to let it sit for another hour and you're gonna gradually increase the weight over the course of 5 hours. After the 5th hour, you're done pressing your cheese. But let me show you what I mean when I say to flip your cheese. So here's another one that I have been working on already today. So you take your follower off, use the handles on your cheesecloth to pull your cheese out, and just simply take the cheesecloth off, flip it, bring the cheesecloth back around it, and put it back in the mold, just like that. And then you can redress it and go on with your pressing. All right, everybody got that? Awesome. So now, unlike a lot of cheeses, we're not gonna put it straight in a brine. We're gonna take it out of the mold after it's been pressing for 5 hours. Take the cheesecloth off of it. Look at that. Pretty, huh? Now we're going to take it and we're going to put it on a small plate with a draining mat and a towel to catch any whey. And then I like to put a piece of cheesecloth over it to keep dust and stuff off of it. And you're going to let it sit for 8 to 10 hours. This just lets it dry out a little bit. After that 8 to 10 hours or overnight, if you do this, then it's like 7 o'clock at night. You don't need to set your alarm for 5 o'clock in the morning if you get up at 6 or if you get up at 7. It'll be fine for an extra hour or two. So your next step is brining. Now brining does 2 things. It adds flavor to your cheese and it helps to preserve your cheese. For our Swiss cheese here, our baby Swiss, we want to brine it for about 6 hours. Our brine solution is a lighter solution, and it is about 2 quarts of water to a cup of non-iodized salt. Do not use iodine when you're making cheese. Do not use it in the cheese making process. It will kill that wonderful bacteria you're developing to do the good flavor in your cheese. And just simply take your cheese, put it in your brine, and you will notice it floating. It's supposed to do that. And about halfway through your 6-hour period, just pick your cheese up out of the brine, flip it, and put it back in there. Got that? Perfect, I knew you would. So after the 6 hours is over, and I'm gonna go back and brine this, take your cheese out of the brine, pat it dry with some paper towels. Now you're going to start your aging process. There's 1 of 2 things you can do at this point. You can vacuum seal it and put it in your cheese cave at 50 to 55 degrees, or you can do a natural rind. You can put it in a Tupperware container such as this with the lid off. You can put it on a plate like this, which we'll do because that's what I have right there, and put it in your aging space. And this is what's called a natural rind development. When you do it this way, you're going to have to do a brine wash on it every 2 to 3 days. And this is so that it doesn't develop mold. And what I do, because I don't like my cheese super salty, is I take 2 cups of water and about a tablespoon and a half of kosher salt. And I have a little piece cheesecloth I keep in it. And I just get it so it's damp. And after about 2 or 3 days in the cheese cave, you're just going to take it and you're just going to wipe it down on the sides. And if you notice that it's starting to dry out, just get a little bit more, squish it out Do it again. Put it back on the plate and put it away. 2 weeks. But watch it, especially if you don't vacuum seal it. Now the next step is where you start to develop your eyes. You're going to take it out from its 50 to 55 degree home and you're going to put it in an environment that's 65 to 70 degrees. So I live in California. I cannot make this cheese in the summer because there's nowhere in my house that's 65 to 70 degrees. So I make a bunch of Swiss in the winter and in the fall. So you're going to put this on your countertop at 65 to 70 degrees. You're going to cover it with your cheesecloth. You're going to put it out just like this. And every couple days, you're going to flip it and you're going to do your brine wash again. You're going to leave it out for 3 to 4 weeks, depending on how many eyes you want to develop. So what happens here is that piece Romani that we added, when it feels the heat, it's like those things you put in your mouth, the pop rocks. Is that what they're called? Pop rocks? And they go pop, 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 pop. That's what's happening when you increase the heat. The piece Romani is going poop, 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 poop. And it's making those beautiful eyes that we want in a Swiss style cheese. So you leave it out. At the end of your 3 to 4 weeks, you can put it back into your cave at 50 to 55 degrees and let it age however long you want. 2 weeks is where you want to eat it, or where I want to eat it. You can actually eat it at the time that you're done sitting it out in the 65 to 70 degrees. But I like to put it away for 2 to 4 months. And you can either continue with the brine wash or you can vacuum seal it. Either way is fine. Your eyes have been developed. Now you're just developing flavor in the middle. If you vacuum seal or wax, it'll be wonderful. So, Swiss style cheeses. So good. A lot of steps, but nothing super complicated. Continue to use this video as informational resource for you. And go, oh, what did she do there? And fast forward and watch that step a few times if you have any questions about it. Thank you everybody for joining me. Check out all my other videos. I sure enjoy spending time with you. Bye now. Take care.